13th, and we're going to water and sewer, which is on page 88 in your blue book.
Any questions, Mr. Mayor? Under non-departmental, I'm having trouble getting my numbers to line up, Cindy. Here it says 1.697.
What page are you on?
88.
Page 88. And then I go and I look at page 90, and non-departmental is 5.4 million.
That's minus. The non-departmental budget includes the transfers to the general fund, the R&R, the debt service. So it's those things below the line that are actually on this page called out separately down here. So if you take this non-departmental number, the operating portion of non-departmental, and you add the debt service that's called out in the middle of the page, the transfers to the general fund that are down on the bottom. If you look at the non-departmental
all that
over
gets
here,
rolled back in non-departmental.
right?
Okay.
If you look on page 112,
It's so confusing.
well, if you look on page 112, that's probably the best place to clarify it, not the one, the summary one. So yeah, those two things, the
Okay.
personnel and operating, truly are operating expenses. So we put those above the line. The rest of these are the transfers, the debt service, the R&R, and those are revenue distribution.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for starters?
Could I point one thing out that was in the memo, please? I'm sorry. Just to preface the conversation, one thing about this budget that I pointed out in the memo is, although it looks like the surplus or the balance available for additions is $2.6 million, that's not really typical of a normal fiscal year for this fund because of, here we are again, we refinanced a loan this year. And when we did it, we made a debt service payment essentially early, and so we don't have a principal payment in 13-14. So in 14-15, that principal payment will bring the debt service back up to where it belongs to about $1 million higher than it is for 13-14. So that's a kind of a blip that makes the 1.6 or so that we've been running typically look even bigger than it is. So I just wanted to point that out.
And what do we have the reduction of operating revenue? About $350,000.
Just we've had a wet year, so we're looking at it from a rain standpoint. We budgeted, I think, 9.2, and if the rest of the year this year and is similar next year, it's probably going to be about 8.9 versus 9.2 that we budgeted. You know, then you look at a year where we had the drought and we hit 10.8. You know, so I was trying to budget somewhere around what our expectations are versus leaving a number that's a historical average that may not. I'd rather come in next year and say we're at 9.2 and we budgeted 8.9 versus come in and say we're only at 8.9 and we budgeted 9.2. So.
But it has nothing to do with our pricing scale based on the reuse water or anything?
No, we reduced that. Under reuse, there is a reduction under reuse, but under the water sales, which was the larger number, that was based on the rain. And reuse also is based on rain because they're not using as much reuse, but there is a reduction in the pricing scale of about 70.
That's where I was going to go to. No, actually, it's 2012-13 projected revenue is 713, and your 2013-14 budget of only 615. So
right.
We went down $100,000 in projected revenue.
About 70,000 is where we're not raising the reuse rates. We were following the county rate structure, and they were supposed to go up about 7 cents, and I think that 7 cents equates to somewhere around $60,000-$70,000.
And that's one of the reasons that when this originally came to a vote, I voiced concerns about going to the change in the rates simply because it was going to cut down our revenue. And now we see that you're expecting revenue of $100,000 less for giving rates to a tiny area of our county.
Actually, that's for everybody. We've frozen it for everybody.
We froze it for everyone, but the reason we did that was in order to get additional customers, and yet we are taking a hit for that.
Well, while we're on that subject, where do we stand with South Beach and the negotiations there? 'Cause I'm sure they're demanding county rates as well.
We have offered
Should be
county
the same.
rates over and over and have said that we're ready to bring that to council. We had a meeting about 10 days ago with the county attorney, who's now retiring, but with the county attorney, and he said he would take it back to his people and get back with me, and I have not heard anything. He did bring the new county attorney with him, and he also had the new utility director with him when we met, and we discussed it, and I have not heard back.
So they backed off of trying to determine the ownership of all these assets and value those at this time.
That has not come up. Initially speaking, it sort of came up, and they said, well, you're not interested. But he said, you're not interested in promoting the sale of the system. And I said, no, I'm not. And he says, well, we'll just forego that. And so we've been talking about how to transition if they wanted to lease the lines and buy bulk water from us. And one of the things we threw out early on, now this has been, maybe a year ago, whenever you all first authorized me to start discussions and not negotiations, we threw out the possibility of selling bulk. And we said, we will take your wastewater as an example, your bulk sales to the city of Fellsmere. They weren't really interested in buying at that rate. And then we stopped because they had introduced legislation to take over the system. That legislation didn't go anywhere, so then we've had, was it, Wayne, 1 or 2 meetings since then? Legislative session, just the one? And then that's the one he's supposed to get back with us. But we have offered over and over. It's been in the newspaper. I talked to the president of the association down there. The exact same pricing that we gave to Indian River Shores would be available to South Beach.
Okay, and obviously the point still nobody's really talked about is franchise fee.
That we did talk about franchise fee, but the county obviously would have the right to do a franchise fee. It wouldn't be our franchise fee. We would have the equalization charge based on hours, but they could charge their franchise fee if they wish to do so.
They could impose that on top of the rates. Our equalization charge would be what?
The 6% is the equalization.
Be considered our equalization.
That's
okay,
correct.
thank you.
And so theoretically, their rates come down 4%, but our revenue projections indicates otherwise in actual revenues coming back from the sale because they have a lot of large customers.
You know, Jim, and for discussion, I was with Dr. Verity, and he didn't realize that all that you just said had happened. And or at least
and I sent him an email.
Yeah, after that, I know you did. I told you, made that comment to you. I know you did. Thank you. And I don't say it for that reason, who he is. I say it for the reason that I would believe that the vast, vast majority of people who live in South Beach don't know the story that you just told.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And the bad part is we've said it over and over and over, talking to the homeowners association, although they never invited me to one of their meetings. And we both, Rob and I, went and had lunch and talked to the guy and said I'd be very happy to come down and address, and then understand the county got on the agenda the next.
And then they canceled because they didn't want to have a conflict at the meeting. They canceled yours. Yeah.
The thing is, the vast number of people live down there. I'm more or less, I'm invited down there because I somehow or another live almost in the area. And I would tell you, and I know a lot of people down there, very few are part of going to those meetings or part of it. So I'm talking about the general population. I don't know that they can reach the general population anyway. But I don't think people down there realize that they're at an economic disadvantage they don't need to be if they would just work with the city. Is that accurately stated? I mean, in case it gets quoted in the press, I just don't believe people understand what we're willing to do.
Or just again, for clarification, rethinking what came up in our last meeting with the county attorney, he did broach the equalization charge, and he says, well, I would take it back that we split that 3 and 3. And I said, that's not the issue. The issue is if you want to charge a franchise fee, you can choose to do that. If you don't, then that's an option that you have. But my recommendation to the council is that we would do the exact same rates we gave Indian River Shores.
Have to.
Yeah.
Rob, I didn't give you the opportunity to do an opening statement. I'm sorry.
I know. So
Did you have-
Actually, I
You just
was
jumped.
going to, as an opening statement, I was going to defer to Cindy, who actually made the statement that we needed to start this off with. That when you read through here, do not think that there's $2.6 million in excess revenues. That's just a blip on the screen this year. Next year, it should fall back to where we are, normally are
Back to
operating.
our normal.
And if you go through the revenues on page 89, let me put my glasses on. As Councilman Carroll said, we did reduce the irrigation for reuse. One was based on the not going up on the rates, and the other was because we've noticed that everybody's conserving water. I mean, there's been this new push by the St. Johns River Water Management District of the 1-day irrigation per week and 2 days during the summer time, like now. And we've seen, and when we went up on our rates on reuse, we saw probably about a 20 to 30% reduction in the volume that the people were using. When it was cheap, they were over irrigating crazy, and so we've seen a reduction. In fact, we've met with Bermuda Bay, and they've gone to, I didn't realize it, but they actually control the timers on the houses that are there. So they've gone to 2 days a week irrigation, and they were complaining about pressures, and when I sat down with them and noticed what they were doing, then we've made some corrections, because they're creating their own problem by shrinking everything down to from a 7-day window to 4 days. Everybody now is taking more at a given time, and now they've created this problem. So we're working with them to back that back to, and I understand what they were trying to do is they're trying to police it. So they're trying to go around and notice by numbers on houses when they're irrigating if anybody messed with their timers or not. So now they're going to 6 days, which they still can police, and hopefully they won't have the pressure problems that they've had. But we did reduce on meter sales for looking at a better number for where we are in this wet season. And 8.85 is about what we received 2 years before the droughts hit. That was the year prior to that. So I kind of went back to that number. The reuse went down a little bit.
Are we expanding? I thought we were expanding reuse, though.
We are. I didn't really put any numbers in that until I see the sales increase, and then I would want to come back with.
Okay, so this is
I didn't want to project something that didn't happen, and then be trying to explain to Cindy trying to explain to Finance Commission why we're not meeting that requirement.
Okay, that's fine. Just that we know that it's under forecasted. Then.
Speaking of that, we also sent the letters out.
Yeah, we sent 10 letters. Out of the first 22, we went through, and we took in front of the Utility Commission, and they seemed to agree with it, and I never really brought it back in front of council. But if you go north, once you cross over the Merrill Barber Bridge and get up around J.C. Park there, that line is at capacity, and anything we do with taking on more customers is just going to impact the problems that we currently have. So we're focusing on the Central Beach area, and so what I've done is the first 22 customers that had signed up, there's 10 of them that qualify. They're one not on. They have sewer service also, and two they have they're south of J.C. Park and in the Central Beach area. So we've sent 10 letters out. We'll see what response we get back. And what I'd like to do is meet with each one of them individually so that we can give an estimate of what any lines extending to their properties are going to cost. Also, we're talking about reclaimed water, so you don't irrigate everything with reclaimed water. You don't want to get in areas around your pool or where people may be eating and that kind of stuff, because while it is a good source of water for grass, it's not a great source of water for every place else, and so we want to sit down individually, one-on-one, and come up with those costs, and then let them make a decision. And then once we get through those 10, we'll move further down the list.
Okay, you want to just walk us through these, Rob?
Sure.
On page 90.
Well, on 89, just one
Okay.
comment, if you please. Interest on investments, so far year to date, we've collected 7. We always overestimate, or at least for the last 2.5 years have overestimated interest. If you figured 1% of what cash value, it may not be 55. You may be optimistic. What's the cash balance?
Well, the reason that we left it there, at least at this point in time, was our 11-12 actual ended up being about 56,000. So we did bring it down back in line with 11-12, and the total cash balance.
If we take 1% of that, you'll have a good number. That's with interest rates going up. We don't do that well right now. We're 0.86 and 0.52, but
Yeah, and we had, again, the investments that we make of idle cash are governed a little differently than our pension investments. We have to have them in things with no more than a 3-year window. We have a lot of T-bills. That first quarter was really not a good thing. So we can have another look at that number. I was sort of dropping back to taking it down, but at least leaving it where it was, 11-12. Give me a moment to come up with the year-end September 30th. We had 9, 10, 11, about $12 million. Cash and investments.
so you got a 0.5% here. That's okay.
Okay, Rob?
All right, if you move on to page 90, this is a summary of the projected operating costs by division or department, or whichever you prefer to call it. If you look at the 2013-14 versus 2012-13, every one of the divisions is lower. It just happened to happen that way. So we've and when you get to the bottom number, if you look at it, it's roughly 1.18 million change. Now, if you fall back to what Cindy said, next year we're going to have $1 million come back into this equation. So this budget reflects not only what reductions we've been able to achieve this year, but also what additions we had to add back in, and that you'll see later when you hit the non-departmental end, because this budget is reflecting the electric department going away halfway through the year. We will see additional costs associated with customer service and then possibly some other general fund additional costs. So
on the converse of that, with the direction that we took yesterday to remove the assumption that we sell the electric utility at March 31st, these will be adjusted. There won't be the benefit of the unfunded liability pension savings, but we also will eliminate the increased transfer. So that should net out. But we do have a fairly substantial reduction in utilities costs based on that.
Which will add back in again. I don't see much change either way when we looked at it. The one seemed to cancel out the other, where we saw, and for the last 2 years I've tracked numbers and did bill by bill by bill what it would be worth what we're paying right now for electric versus if we went to FPL, and I'm seeing somewhere around a $300,000 to $350,000 overall savings for us. But like we said, the increase for the customer service goes up by that much, so they're a wash.
And that's one thing that I think I'd mentioned in the memo that you and I have talked about. In going through the exercise of assuming the sale of the electric utility, what we discovered is when we remove the electric and we relook the admin charge-outs and the customer service allocation, it sort of shifts a little disproportionate amount over to water and sewer. And so what Rob and I are going to work on between now and when that sale actually takes place is figuring out some ways to streamline some of the operations and reduce those costs so that when it does happen, it doesn't push as much of a burden onto water and sewer as the math shows that it would as it stands.
And what is our current number of customers that are in the electrical system as opposed to the customers that would only be billed water sewer?
Round numbers, it's around, what, 34,000 versus 11, 12?
About,
something like that.
yeah, 35,000 to 12,000.
So with 11 or 12,000, would it be more cost effective to go to a billing service as opposed to doing that in-house and taking the funds in-house?
Actually, we still need to read the meters and all those sorts of things. So what we're going to try to do is
Those are parts of the budget already,
right,
as
and
opposed
so-
to moving over from customer service.
right. But I really don't think that it will. I think we've also got the solid waste customers and the revenue collection, all of that balled up together. What we're going to try to do is render customer service as small as possible, as effective as possible. What we suspect, and we'll certainly will know within a short time after the sale, is that most of the call volume and real issues associated with our customer service is related to the electric utility. And I really don't think that even though the volume of customers only goes down by 2/3, I suspect that the volume of issues, problems, calls will go down by more than that.
Okay.
And in addition, we've been looking at exactly how many meter readers we'll need, and would it be more appropriate for them to be actually a part of the water sewer utility as opposed to part of the customer service department. So we're going to work towards all those things to minimize these costs.
Yeah, and also, if you take like dispatch, part of what we'll be looking at is how to handle the call-outs overnight. Right now, it all goes through electric T&D dispatch. If you have you pick up your bill and you call the number that's on the bill, you go right to the dispatch. That won't be there anymore.
Right.
So, when I used to work for another utility, we had them usually calling the water plant in the middle of the night because that's manned 24 hours a day. So sometimes you got a recording if he was out doing a shift, but usually they got back and they called the person back, and then they would call in and dispatch people out. So those are the hurdles that we'll work through as we get closer. So really on page 90, that shows all your expenses.
Well, don't go past that. This number 376% jumped out at me at state unemployment comp. What happened there, Cindy?
Again, that one, let me see, I'm sorry, I keep flipping back and forth to pages. There was actually one layoff associated with yours. And
One layoff won't get you 376% increase.
it will get you to $7,150, which is the dollar amount.
Dollar amount,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the max unemployment
Okay.
benefit right now. So yeah,
Okay.
that's the percentage is high, but the dollar amount's just one person at the max benefit.
And the increase in professional services? Going up 13.6%.
Where are you at?
Sorry, I'm in the middle of page 91. You're going from 93.7 to 106.
Up from 65 in 11-12.
Yeah.
65, 93, 106.
Uh-huh.
That's-
I'd have to go back to the
That-
individual sheets
I
to
will
find
tell you.
out where that is.
I will tell you. I believe I know what that is, and that is we, instead of putting in the entire cost of the renegotiation of the contracts for the Teamsters into the general fund, we split them proportional to how many Teamsters there were in each utility and in each
So
fund.
this is for our attorney who is negotiating for us.
Gotcha.
Distributed. I will tell you again, as we talked about yesterday, those numbers are worst case, and certainly if we do wrap it up sooner, it will be better. But we wanted to go ahead and be conservative and assume that this might linger into next fiscal year. So.
And before we leave, I guess the overall, what's your overall head count for the whole water and sewer department?
We are at 58 right now.
58?
And we're proposing 58 for this budget, 54 for the next budget, and then down to 50. So where we were going from 72 to 50 over 12 years, my boss told me we needed to do it in 5, and we're doing it in 4. So I have one more.
That's what I wanted to hear, Rob. Thank
Okay.
you.
And you actually do have 62 budgeted for 12-13. So
Right.
you've done something that
We did a big
Jim
jump in the
spoke to
first year.
yesterday. As things happened during the year, you went ahead and made those changes during this fiscal year without waiting until 1 October.
Right.
So.
And Rob, can you explain the negative budgetary line item of an environmental cleanup recovery? On page 91.
Oh, that is the airport, where we actually clean up the contamination in the airport, and we track all those costs associated with the cleanup portion of it, and then we charge the airport back for those services.
Okay, so this is funds coming from the airport, but it's a
Us.
wash.
Right.
Yeah,
This
there's a
will be then
corresponding
on the-
line item
okay,
in their
thank
budget.
you.
Exactly.
And
Years ago, they developed a number and then they just held the number. But when we went through the FAA discussions, part of it they wanted a true tracking. So every year we're actually collecting in the rear. So the 213 is what we spent last year, and we're going to collect it now this coming year.
then the vehicle maintenance, a large jump.
I don't know if Monty had a chance to discuss that.
We did. That's what we discussed yesterday, where we did the full cost allocation of fleet management, where before we were only charging out to the various funds, the mechanics, and not the overhead and the management. So we redid our allocation and did a full cost allocation, so it impacted the other funds.
$92.
Again, this is a roll-up of all the different divisions.
Then the increase in customer service is based on the sale.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we take those numbers out, we're going to be dropping down to the 230.
We should be right back around where we were in 12-13. And that is what we're talking about, though, where you can see, based on the assumption of the sale, it did push a disproportionate amount over to water sewer. So that's our challenge before we get to the point where it really happens.
And I think if you go back to the old style of where you're taking that out, we won't have a reduction in every division like you had in the first page. So.
Yeah, the utilities will go from one.
They'll go up, and so it'll bump around. It'll stay about the same. Yeah.
They'll go up $300,000. Wash.
Yeah, probably will be.
Yeah. Very close.
Page 93, wastewater treatment.
Okay, we have a reduction of one position in wastewater treatment this year.
Is that based on an open position or a dismissal?
Yes, someone left, and we really only have one position where there's somebody actively in that position that will be no longer employed with the city come October 1st out of 4. So 3 of them have gone on and either left employment or retired. If you look at under operating expenses on the other contractual services, and you look at the utilities, those 2 line items, I believe a majority of the council members were at the utility commission meetings or was able to get the information on the Clean B system that we were looking at installing. That'll come back at the next council meeting. I did not adjust those 2 numbers to represent that capital project because that capital project will probably take 9 months to do. So we'll be well halfway through.
9 months to get the product here up and running.
Right.
Okay.
So where there's a $225,000 savings, I left the budgetary numbers as if that project didn't move forward.
Is the $75,000 in odor control, is that part of it too, dropping down?
That is if we didn't do it and we're rebuilding beds. So it may be a lot cheaper if we go ahead with the project and we only have to rebuild one of the cells in that bed. And that's the mulch bed that's out there on the other side of the tanks on the waterfront that the foul air goes through and it has a biological reaction that reduces the hydrogen sulfides to sulfuric acid. So it eats away at the mulch and the bugs.
Wood chips, isn't it?
It's wood chips, and the bugs eat the wood chips, and then eventually becomes dust, and we have to replace the wood chips. So, and they're actually oak wood chips, so they usually come out of Georgia, and
Oh, good gosh.
it's costly to do it. So, but that's if I left the numbers as that project wasn't moving forward, and we would be rebuilding the bed next
But
year.
we're going to see that the 16th, right?
You're going to see that on the 16th.
With the recommendation from the Utility Commission.
And then on the next page, chemical and water supply, we went up about $10,000 last year. As one of my concerns that we discussed with the lab was with our lab going away, when we couldn't make reclaimed water, it was easier when we had a lab because they could continually test and then the water could go back online. We were having some difficulties, and years ago we used to feed sodium aluminate, which is like Tums. Mm-hmm. So we went ahead and bought some, and it seemed to work. It just kept us below those levels. And when we would have a lot of times, what happens is we'll have a rain event, and the pH will drop in the water. and the plant will start to get effects by the pH being lower, and this way we can kind of feed the sodium aluminate, and it keeps the plant on track. So we went ahead and budgeted another $10,000, which is about what it costs us to fill that tank up, or at least half the tank. So that's why I increased that. Water treatment, again, we're down by one position there. And in wastewater treatment, eventually in 2 years after we do the cross-training, we will go down another 2 positions in wastewater treatment and 3 positions in water treatment. So you'll know those numbers are...
Rob, 196, you have a complete the conversion of wells number 5 and 31 to raw water sources. What's that entail?
Well number 5 and 31 are Floridan wells. So they're what layman people call deep well, because it's artesian flowing, but it's not really the deep well like we are injecting down into. But they went to right now they're piped and they go to the lime plant, and they were used when the water quality was real good in those wells. They were used daily, but they were mainly there for large irrigation demands back in the 80s when people there was no reused water, and the demand would go out of sight. What we're going to use those wells for is to feed a couple new skids at the RO plant and be redundant for backup, since they're really not being used anymore for the lime treatment plant. And part of that is piping, and then part of that is the wellhead itself, the pumps, and the discharge head has to be stainless steel so that you don't have any iron getting into the water system to go through the membranes, because they'll foul the membrane. So that's where the major cost is stainless steel is just incredible in price these days. So, but we're finishing the permitting, and we now have the pump size that we need for the new skids that we're looking at, and that's another thing that will come through Utility Commission in probably a couple months to you.
And redrilling a well number 8?
Yeah, number 8 is actually in the northeast part of the airport, and it's been offline for a while. It had a problem with the screen in it, and it needs to be redrilled. If we're going to eventually move away from the western part of the well field where the cleanup and shrink back to where we're only going to have the north part of the well field and the south part of a well field, then to have enough wells and have redundancies, we need to redrill number 8. So we're looking at doing that one.
Is that in your budget?
Yes, in the capital budget. Page 97, we went up on other contractual services for mowing. That is where Monty went out to bid for the mowing contract. We're going to look at utilizing their mowing contractor to mow areas of the water plant and well field, and then be able to reduce one person, which is our groundskeeper. That will be the one that will be displaced from October 1st. If you don't see anything on 90...
How about structure and improvement maintenance? Just you haven't spent very much here to date.
No, yeah, but there were some stuff that we just did on the painting or the inspections of the inspections of the tanks, the water tanks at the power, or not at the power plant, but at the lime treatment plant. That the payments haven't come through yet, so you're not seeing an expenditure. So you'll see that expenditure coming through. And we will have to paint the exterior of one of those tanks. That'll use up some of that. Every 5 years, we have to do a structural integrity evaluation of not reused tanks, but only water tanks.
98.
The chemical and water treatment, again, I'm sure you got a similar explanation. It's $275 year to date, so it's for whatever reason.
That's down just because of the water use is down.
So is 530? You went down 20,000. Is that the right? I don't know. It's just
chemical and water treatment depends on when we're buying in bulk, so it's going to depend on when deliveries. It's not like 1/12. So if I'm ordering lime or if I'm ordering a acid or something like that, it may hit at the end of the year when we're topping tanks off that you have a larger expense. So it's a tough one to say that it's 1/12 every month. But I'll take a look at it.
In 11-12, it was 491 was your actual. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like 500 is a better number than 530. Not that it's any big deal, but
We can adjust that down or leave it as
I don't
it is.
know. It's a question.
Yeah.
Just as a matter of interest, Rob, when they're in here about you're going to replace some of the filters or the RO membranes, do you do that as a rotation, a third here, a third this year, a third next year, or you do it all at one time?
They do it all at one time. So the RO plant will probably be down for about a 3-day period while you're redoing all that. It usually goes down for about 2 days while we're cleaning them.
How much are those membranes? They're awful expensive.
They're a lot cheaper now than they ever been.
We used to buy them in a couple plants I worked in.
Oh, they were a fortune when they first came out on the market, but now for us to replace them at the water plant will cost us about $250,000, which isn't bad for about 25 or 2 million gallons worth of treatment. So back in the day, they were a lot more than that, probably 3 times as much.
Yeah, I remember.
And that is another project. We're going to replace those next year. We're going to come before council here real soon for the engineering services to pick the new membrane, because as we move towards putting in an additional couple skids, smaller skids at the RO plant, we can use a looser wound membrane and tweak it with less water in the lime softening plant to achieve the same water quality that we have and drop our operating pressures and have a huge electrical savings. So where before we were running just 2 million gallons because we didn't have a deep injection well and we had a discharge to the river, we wanted the tightest wound membrane so that we had the best water quality coming out to mix it with lime softening. Now we can go to a lesser water quality coming through the reverse osmosis plant and adjust it with the lime softening plant to get the same water quality and run at a cheaper.
So you have more wastewater going through, more residual water after you clean up.
No, it'll be about the same recovery, 85%. It's just it won't remove all of the minerals and everything else out of the water. Where we worried about color and all those other issues, it'll still address the color, but it'll allow some of the salts to go through. And like I said, by the time we blend everything back, we'll still have the same water quality, but we'll be able to reduce our operating costs.
Yeah, okay.
Good answer.
Plus, we'll have more skids, and at that point, yes, you could go to where you're always running reverse osmosis because you have 3 skids, so you could take one offline, do repairs to it, versus now we have to really plan around this time of year where you have a huge rain events and you have low amount of water coming out of the water plant where we can still get good quality water through just the lime softening plant. In a drought, we couldn't take the reverse osmosis plant offline, but with more skids, you could have one out of service at any time of the year.
100, wastewater reuse.
There, the reduction in utilities is from looking at going to FPL rates versus the others, so that'll adjust back. I believe I had a number that was less than the 375, but not 260. So
we went over page 99, but one of the major goals, if you just touch on that, implement the use of the water from the main relief canal to supplement the reclaimed water system. Tell us what's going on there and how that can actually promote water conservation.
Where we have just installed the stormwater pump station in the main relief canal, we now will have somewhere between 300 to 500,000 gallons a day of excess capacity in the reclaimed water system. We will try to send as much water through the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant is rated at 4.5 million gallons a day. We operate roughly at about 3.2 million gallons a day on an average daily flow. We need the main relief canal pump project will give us about 1.5 million gallons of extra water per day. We want to keep 1 million in reserves for droughts because we get hit in March and April with everyone going home The flows reduced from 3.2 million or 3.4 million all the way down to 2.3 million gallons of wastewater coming in. And then on the other side, the reuse demand, because now all of a sudden it's dry, goes from 2.5 to 3.5, almost pushing 4 million gallons a day. So we don't want to oversell like we did in the past. And the reason the city oversold reuse years ago was because they didn't have an injection well, they didn't have a disposal method. So they wanted to make sure that the least amount of water was going into the Indian River Lagoon as possible. So therefore, they oversold, and they were supplementing with potable water so that there weren't any discharges. Now that with an injection well, you don't have the discharges, we need to get to a comfortable level of where we can sell and be able to supply the amount of water needed without hitting the other high-end cost water sources and the environment. I mean, the stormwater pond will, thanks to Ms. Carroll pointed out a while ago, is good for the environment because you're reducing the amount of nitrogen. Anything that you capture going into the lagoon, one, both from a freshwater standpoint, which they really suffer with down in Lake Okeechobee, and then two, from the nitrogen levels that are in the water, you're now removing that from that water stream and sending it through our wastewater plant and out for a good use, which is irrigation water to residents.
So then a lot of the water from the main relief canal is coming from all of the western part of the county,
yes,
straight through and right into the lagoon right now. So we are actually going to be cleaning some of that water as it comes through the city limits before the rest goes on out to the lagoon.
Yes.
Which is, that's an amazing thing. I think the city of Vero Beach needs to receive some accolades for doing that. I don't know whether the accolades are financial or just a nice little certificate somewhere from St. John's
on the St.
Water
John's,
Management.
yeah, the water management they did. They actually, Carl Larrabee said this is one of the best projects I've seen at one of their board meetings because it was just, it made a lot of sense, and he liked it. In fact, we were in the process of submitting in our modification for our consumptive use permit to handle the increase or the amount of reverse osmosis water that we were going to have to pull, changing which aquifer was coming out of it. And after he saw this project, he came down and we were talking, and there was some legislation going, and he told me to pull my request for the April hearing and put it on December because part of the legislative change that was going forward was that if a city was doing their job and meeting conservation and promoting the environment and doing other projects, they should be rewarded in some fashion. And one of the things that they're going to be doing, and we may be one of the first cities that gets it, is where I'm going in for a modification to the permit, since we're doing our job, they're going to extend our consumptive use permit another 10 years. So where we had a 20-year permit and we're in year 10 now, we're going to now get another 20-year permit out of them. So that reduces our costs that we normally have to do to renew those permits.
Good answer. Administration.
Question, sorry, before you get started. Under major goals and challenges, you still have this mapping program. Well, back in...
Years back.
May, I guess, I brought this up at a council meeting, and it says of December 2013, 25 of the 82 sheets were done, and it's supposed to be completed in 5 months.
I don't think 5 months. Did I say that?
Yep.
I didn't think I said 5 months,
That was
did I?
a very ambitious program.
That was real ambitious. Maybe that might be a typo. Let me find out from Jim Kirkpatrick
that was
where we are.
started at, yeah, I was going to say, it was...
You might have spoke a typo.
Yeah.
As of March, you had 25 of 82 done, so you already had a quarter of them done by then. So...
Yeah, let me talk with Jim and see where we're at, and I'll report back to you.
Is this not a project of our GIS
And
department?
now that we still have 3 GIS people, I was going to say, why aren't we getting more efficient, more productivity out of these people?
It's actually a combination.
Right, but we're 3 right now and going down to 2. So while we have 3 is what she's saying that we should get this done.
The person left.
Oh, the
There's
person
only
left.
2 person. Okay. There's only 2 people there.
There
The mapping part is coordination between my department and Monty's department. It's not all being done by Monty's department. So we have a field person that's going out and mapping with a GPS device all the different lines that are out there, then bringing that raw data in to David Gay, who compiles that data and then gives it to Terry, who then is mapping out and creating all these maps, and then it comes back to us for checking. So it's an elaborate system, and I would love to take about a half hour of anybody's time, or maybe do it at a meeting at some point to show you what we're doing, because then you'll understand the complexity of it and why it's taking this long. Because we have not just water, sewer, but we have gas, we have electric, we have everything that's in there. That's when you pull up the map and you zoom in on an aerial, you can actually see the point is in the proper place. So
Could you get back to us? Yeah, then with with the completion date for that project,
Sure.
please. Thank you.
102.
Professional services, is that part of the, it's 25,000. It was 736 last year. It's 2,600 so far year to date.
That may be where it is. Let me have a look. I've got my backup for where I live.
One more
that's
question.
typically where that is
I think we
for
put those
anything
in
that
one.
has to do with personnel issues. That 25,000 is covers attorneys, covers.
But that's $25,000 just for the 6 employees in administration?
No, that's for the whole.
All right, I
The
understand.
whole.
Okay.
And subscriptions and memberships, what's the $9,000 for? The very last line item for 6 people.
That also deals with memberships in AWWA, which is American Water Works Association, and it's not just 6 people. It's like a utility subscription. So we receive a lot of regs and everything else. It's for the entire department.
And you receive what now?
The regulations and every changes and updates and all kinds of information from Utility Council. There's a couple of them. I can get a list of what the costs are and everything that goes to all those if you would
The
like to break
ongoing
down.
rate would be $9,000 if you just took what he'd spent and added the remaining 4 months. I don't know that it's even, though.
Yeah, like for the memberships for the 6 people, there may be an AWWA or water resource thing of $25 for employees, but a large is for the utility itself.
$103, facilities maintenance and asset management. I wanted to say assistance.
That is our maintenance group that maintains the water plant and the wastewater plant.
And once again, there from our optimization study, the target for this group was 5 people.
And I believe we have one retiring hopefully next year as part of our reduction who's in charge of wells. So as we shift from the well field to the other, then you'll see one going down in that. I don't know if I'm going to get to the 5 in this group. We'll see. I think the 5 was part of, if we combine the water and the wastewater on one site, we could definitely get to the 5. If they remain split for a while, we may have to keep with 6. So we're still trying to target the goal of 50, but we're not following the optimization exactly to the. But I know there is. We will definitely go down on a well mechanic as we transition into more reverse osmosis, less number of wells once we shut down that western well field.
Anything on 104?
Well, schools and meetings, he spent $200 year to date and $3,500 last year, so just a question.
Okay.
Huh?
I think there are some other costs that probably have been spent. They're just not showing up in here. I'd have to look.
Why don't you look and let's keep going.
Wastewater collection. 1 position.
One position. I don't think I wrote anything down that jumped out at me other than utilities, again, will be down for lift stations if we went to FPL. But that number will come back up.
Any questions on page 106? Let's move on to 108, water distribution. One person down. Did we got that thing with the fire hydrants all settled with the county, didn't we?
Fire hydrant. Oh, yes, you're talking about the maintenance.
Back on the back on the revenue side, if you back on the revenue side, if you see the 11-12 revenue, it's substantially bigger than the current year
Okay.
budget.
Joe
And-
probably held his heart.
And on water distribution, we had a target of 12, and we're still at 15, so we've got to.
Yeah, we had.
Why are we still so high?
Part of it is the mapping, but like I said, you're going to see some of those reduced down to probably 12 by the time we're done. I'm just counting off the top of my head.
I don't know.
You'll see at least 2 that are going down in water distribution. One of the things that the optimization study didn't address that we need to look at is they didn't address the electric fund going away. So however we blend in, and Cindy kind of mentioned this earlier, is one of the things that we talked about was maybe better that water and sewer takes meter reading, because we can look at the best efficiencies on that side, on the reading part, because not only do you read, but you also have rereads, and you have maintenance on meter boxes and that kind of stuff that we may be able to get best efficiencies with having that under my group versus under the customer service group. So that's going to really change how all water distribution looks.
You're not going to have smart meters?
No, but I would like to do some. That's what AMI and AMR, which is automatic meter reading. I did put in some money for this year's budget. We never did automatic meter reading because unless you did it on the electric, also it didn't make sense.
It makes sense, yeah.
So I was pushing for it 10 years ago, and at the time, John Lee looked at me and said, "No, you're not going to get it, Rob." So I didn't. But that's something that we may want to look at, because as we replace meters, it would make a lot of sense to put in the automatic meter reading.
Especially for the corporate clients that would be having, a large volume, and they'd be read on the same day, and it would be easier for them to track all of their expenses.
Well, in this case, the automatic meter reading isn't like the smart meter where you can see every day what's going on.
But they could see it on the same day each month, and
exactly.
no variables.
Yeah, you could, and then also you have, unlike the electric meters that are usually on the wall or somewhere up high, we have, especially in the downtown area, they're in the ground and they're in the alleyways, and people park their car over the top of it, and you're trying to read the meter and you can't get to it. So, and we had a meter reader hit probably 7 years ago where a car almost backed over him, hit him, and he luckily fell out of the way of the car. So those areas would definitely make sense to put them into where you're just driving a van down the street and picking up all the reads and know exactly.
Oh, it wouldn't communicate directly?
No, usually they're a little radio antenna that's on the meter box itself, so you drive down and it pings each one and picks them all up as you drive down the road.
Not getting out, pulling those.
Yeah,
those-
physically out.
Definitely improve efficiency tremendously.
How about
So I'm sorry, if you don't mind, let me going on with that. So you are putting in some funding to
I put in
look
funding.
at this?
I put in funding for. Normally, we were spending about $65,000 a year on meter replacements, which was just the meter itself, and I upped that to about $100,000 a year for the next 5 years to look at maybe going into some areas and doing automatic reads.
So when you say look at going into it, where is that extra
Starting-
$25,000? You're going to be starting to purchase them and start utilizing them, not just looking at it.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Sorry.
That's a lot of looking.
It does have to
Coincide with the electric.
with the electronics and the uploads of the reads and the things that we have in our billing system right now. So there's some software, hardware integration issues that we have to look at too.
And I may not do anything for the first year because if the electric isn't going, I really can't do it. So we may just have it budgeted and then just keep rolling those numbers, that amount of money forward. And then once something happens with the electric, then we go out and really spend a lot of money putting them in.
Make a real plan.
They're really very easy to
Target
install. So you're going and replacing a meter and then a lid also,
test site.
and the other item is just attached inside the lid. So it's a simple install. It's not difficult.
Great.
Rob, on 104, ground RESV.
104?
I'm 109, I'm sorry. Ground reserve maintenance, I was reading the number at the same time. You spent 0 year-to-date, 201 last year. I don't know what it is. I don't know what our...
Ground reservoirs maintenance, we should, where we went ahead and did the tanks this year and the inspections and part of the painting, that will most likely get eaten up. That one covers the grounds reservoir for Mockingbird and the South Beach area, and that's just general maintenance. If I have to pressure wash them, if I have to do any paintings, any type of repairs on those ground reservoirs. Then there's additional grounds reservoirs at the lime plant and the RO plant that usually shows up not as a line item but under structures and improvements maintenance.
Anything else on? Oh, go ahead.
No, that I'm happy with the answer.
110. I have nothing there. Non-departmental, 112.
Well, the sick annual leave payout is materially changed. I probably understand it, but it's probably worth talking about.
I was looking at. I can really say that the employees at our water and wastewater plant they realize that the downsizing that we're doing, and they've been trying to help out the best that they can. And I've had a few of them that have mentioned that they may be retiring this coming year. And so, not putting names on anybody, I went ahead and had Javier look at what the sick and annual payout would be for those individuals, and that's the true number as what they would stand today, versus just putting a number. Cindy and I talked about it. I mean, historically, we've stuck $50,000 in there, and she said, if you think that those people are going to retire, let's put the real number in. So that's the real number.
And includes the payout for the one layoff as well.
Yes.
Well, it does reduce a tiny amount, the unfunded.
It'll be a one-year blip.
Yeah.
It is. And under operating expenses, that extra $7,700, that's where the costs for negotiation of the Teamsters contracts are. I put it in non-departmental.
Oh, okay.
Professional services.
That 7714 increase is directly the amount that I've allocated to water sewer for the Teamster negotiation based on your percentage of people.
Right. And historically, under the professional services, under admin, if I've had grievances that have gone to arbitration or any other type of external attorney fees, since we didn't handle those through the attorney's office, that's where I would pull those funds from.
Okay.
Because finance usually budgets the number of professional services they need. I look at it based on what we've done in the past.
Anything on 112?
The only other question I had was the bad debt was $252,000 2 years ago, and now it's zero.
The bad debt is actually a year-end allocation, and I will tell you the last 2 years' worth of numbers for the bad debt have been a little bit high because basically we were carrying the uncollectibles and the bad debt weighted heavily toward the electric utility. It was another one of those things. So we sort of righted the ship in terms of what percentage of the bad debt write-offs annually belong to water and sewer and also to the solid waste. So you've seen 2 years of kind of a big jump, and now those numbers should start to normalize a little bit again for next year.
But Cindy, shouldn't there be a budget here? I'll pick a number of $50,000 or something because there's going to be bad debt expense.
Right.
Sure, we can go
That's
and
why
have
I
a
was
look
worried
at
about the zero.
We can have a look at what we think it would be. I mean, again, other than these 2 years that were aberrations, the numbers have been small enough that in the scheme of the total budget, they haven't been a big deal. But we'll go have a look and
Yeah, 'cause
make
it
up a
got
number.
buried. It was 180,000 or something in electric, part of which is probably last year.
Actually, I started fixing it 2 fiscal years back on the audit cycle, so it should be righted itself
Drop
pretty
off
well.
coming year.
But we'll go back and put a number in there.
About 2%?
I don't have any of those numbers with me.
Well, 2% would be $30,000 or something.
Well, 2% of 13.9 million.
Yeah.
That's 270.
If I'm going to come up with a number, I'd really prefer to go back and look at my last year
no.
journal entry. Yeah.
I'm
Peace.
just thinking industry standards when
Peace.
you're thinking 2% of bad debt.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
But again, that 252 isn't representative of 1 year because there was a rather than fix it all in 1 year, which would have been a huge number. The auditors and I decided to spread the fix of carrying the bad debt appropriately to water, sewer, and the rest of them on the uncollectibles across 3 years, so there wouldn't be some huge impact. But based after the third year goes away, we'll have a normal increase each year. The bad debt's a combination of actual write-offs and then an allocation of the uncollectibles that are past 120 days. And that was the part that needed to be fixed. So that number is uncharacteristically large, so we'll go back and come up with the right number for that.
I think what Jay's saying is that you don't see anything outside of the normal on our bad debt collection write-offs that would exceed 5%, let's say.
I don't have the numbers with me. I don't want to pop off a percentage. Nothing that would alarm me or my auditors. And actually, it's been improving slightly. There was a period for a couple of years where the economy was a little tougher, that the percentages had grown and the number had grown. But I'd be happy to come back with some better numbers and better answers.
Rob, one question before we move on to the R&R. We had instituted a policy whereby trucks using an open valve over at the water and wastewater for washing out their trucks and water for the systems were going to be paying for that. I did not see that line item in the budget anywhere. Where did that come in?
It comes in under miscellaneous revenues, way back on page.
That's the $100 permit.
Yeah, it's like $2,500.
I know it's not much, but still.
It's worked fine. I mean, we've had actually almost every one of them now have come back in and paid their $100 and got the same. We sent it. We were able to track them originally, and we sent them all letters saying you're coming due for your $100, and they've all showed up.
Where's that at?
It's actually under miscellaneous revenues. It was not a big enough amount to warrant a separate line item, so it's under miscellaneous.
All right.
Probably. Oh yeah, it shows up on page 89.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Miscellaneous revenues $15,000.
And then this is just of note, because the revenue is going down, the transfer to the general fund went down $30,000 more or less. Just
because it is
fine.
6%, correct?
It's fine. It's good.
And that separate transfer, that pension unfunded liability one, that's another one of those things that would go away as we reverse those assumptions.
Right. I understand.
Okay, on page 114, revenues.
This is for the R&R fund.
And this is another one where if we could put these books aside and take that 5-year CIP out, we can look at the current year in the context of last year and the upcoming year.
I have it as I'm just taking it apart right here.
And that is on page 55 in those 5-year CIP books. While Rob's getting to his pages, just again, you see at the top of page 56, what we are showing here is in the water sewer fund, in the audited version of the financial statements, the 3 individual pieces of the water sewer fund, the debt service, the operating side, and the capital, are all rolled up together into one financial presentation, which is accurate from a GAAP standpoint. But we do have 3 separate pieces in the general ledger, and at one point in time, because they were all rolled up together, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to how much was sitting in capital, how much was sitting in ops. We've been fixing that over the last couple of years. So what we're showing here is that actually coming forward, audited into 12-13, Rob had a balance forward in capital in 423 of about $4.6 million, excluding the 1.8 that was sitting in 423 as a set-aside for that pay down of principal that you authorized when we refinanced here earlier this year. So it was, if you looked in the general ledger or whatever, you'd see more like a 6.5 or so, but that had the 1.8 in it. And so we've got, for 12-13, the audited number, some revisions to the 12-13 projected that will be coming to you in the form of a budget amendment in August, and that include like the Clean B project we just talked about. And then that leaves him with a balance forward to 13-14 of 1.7 for the projects that he has scheduled in the out years. We've tried to, again, the goal here was to sort of level out these transfers from the operating side to the R&R fund, so that instead of having a year we had $2 million, next year was $1 million, next year was $4 million, we can level it out and see that our balances don't drop below a reasonable number considering the size of the projects in any given year. So,
Rob, I'd like to ask you a rhetorical question I know the answer to, but I ask it for a reason. Are we fully keeping up with the maintenance of our system, whether pipe or plant or lift station or whatever?
Yes. I mean, if you look at daily operations and maintenance, lift stations, we visit a lift station 20 times a month.
But my real question is, from time to time, there are those, not in the city, that say, well, we're not keeping our system up to par and things like that. My question is, are we keeping our system fully up to par?
Yes.
And as far as gravity sewer replacements, I know we have some old lines that...
Yeah, we did a lot of gravity sewer replacements in prior years, and when I first got here, they did a lot of grouting. And grouting, you stopped the water from coming into the gravity sewer system, but you really didn't repair anything. All you did was put a Band-Aid on it, and then if you left and went back 60 days, most of the time that grout broke down and it was leaking again. So we shifted from that type of a repair to slip lining the whole line, so that now you have something that has a structure again, and you're able to seal off the ends of it and keep the water out. Because we have a reclaimed water system, we need the water. We don't really need a really, really tight system, so we do allow some of the groundwater to come in, and we then resell it back as reclaimed water. We did a lot of slip lining over about a 5 or 6 year period to make sure that we handled anything that had structural problems. We went in and looked at a lot of the lift station areas, and we still continue to do that. We TV them. We pay attention to when we have rain events like last week. If we have run times pick up on the lift station, we'll go in after the rains go down and TV those areas and look to find out if there is any problems in those areas. And then that's why we budget every year about $100,000 to $200,000 to go in. We have a company that is at our beck and call that we can call. They come in and make the repair and bill us for it. So
we just don't want to see any failures.
No. We had last year. We did have a failure over behind 16th, I think it was, but it was something that we were able to close the street and actually brought Tim Rose in, and he made the repair on an emergency basis, but it didn't put anybody out of sewer or anything. It's just we started seeing a sinkhole in the middle of the road, and it was just one of those areas that something went on and it shifted the pipe, and there's not much you can do about it. But we just had another sinkhole that we ended up slip lining. It needed to be slip lined, but it wasn't what was causing the sinkhole, but that was over by the airport just a couple weeks ago. So, yes, we are keeping up with the maintenance on the sewer and the water, and we're going to be replacing, I know it's been one of the discussions in the airport area, but we're finally going to be replacing those lines in there. We went out to bid. We later found that after we went out to bid that the county probably isn't going to be doing Aviation Boulevard in the next 10 years. So instead of spending $300,000 to just do something on a project that may never happen, we're revisiting that and redesigning that quickly just to put in some step back and bore underneath those roads and handle everything that we need to handle north of Aviation Boulevard and use those funds to do the neighborhood versus doing something that a project may never happen. So.
59, 58 or 59. Anybody have any questions on 58?
Well, to go back to the list here, in terms of impact fees, Mr. Winger, you had year-to-dates. What is our year-to-date on water and sewer impact fees? Do you have those numbers?
Well, I do, but
your-
I didn't write them out, so.
You have them? Okay.
Can you find them in a general ledger faster than I can, Cindy?
Year to date in impact fees for water impact fees, we've taken in 68,000, and for sewer impact fees about 39.3. So.
And were those both a factor of primarily new construction?
Probably, because there has been quite a bit of new construction going on. But anytime, if somebody came in and remodeled or expanded a facility, then we look. Customer service will take their plans that they have, and they'll look at the new number of bedrooms and credit them for the old. And so you don't see a large dollar amount coming in from that type of construction unless they can tear the thing completely down and go vertical up in the air. So,
have we received in the impact fees from the new subdivision in Rio Mar yet?
No, they will not.
Until they pull plans?
Yes.
Okay. So these numbers being substantially higher than we're budgeted for, with the uptick in home sales, we would expect that the numbers may be higher
Yes.
for next year rather than the budgeted that you have here.
Yeah.
Okay.
159, first work order. These are the meters that are inside the plant and not the ones at the houses. Is that right?
Correct. Which line item you're under? Wastewater treatment?
59, page 59.
Page 59.
50.
Your blue book.
I have an extra one of these, Joe. I'll just give it to you. That way you'll have the same thing.
Which one is that under? Wastewater treatment plant meters, yes. That is in the plan itself. And they want us to meter everything.
They.
DEP. They want to know what's coming in, what's going out, what went sideways, what went recirculated through the plant, which is fine. It actually helps us. It's best practices.
HACCP thing.
In years past, everybody would complain that you're just adding costs of construction and maintenance and everything else, but at the end of the day, it really helps with how you operate a plant to know where everything's going, and you can see changes, occurring. So,
What a concept. Know what's going on?
yes.
What's this world coming to?
Well, I mean, if you really, I went back to a 1955 study that we did on water, and back then they had a 30. They said, well, the water losses aren't that high at 35%. Well, today, if you're over 10%, they're going to crucify you. So back in those days, they didn't care about it. Water was cheap, and
Just keep the pressure up, huh?
so
Okay.
changed in the last 50 years.
On page 60, automation optimization study.
So again, I'd say, hey, we need to take this in a policy and philosophy decision from the council, because I think it's foolish to be spending this money to automate, an old plant until we've investigated any other options that we may have.
Yeah, and
You're saying he needs to come forward to council with what? Right?
I just object to the concept of spending money for an automation study until we've explored any other options for the waste treatment plant.
And you're saying you'd want him to come forward with other options?
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, what I've looked at, and this is based on the optimization study, this is plant automation that we've been doing. And, we've all talked about what are we going to do with the wastewater plant in the future. And this is just me, from a logical standpoint, until the power plant issue and the electric system goes away, it comes to fruition. I mean, the wastewater plant being right next to the power plant doesn't change anything from that location in those areas. If eventually the power plant is torn down, which we don't know any time frame other than 2017 to 2020 or somewhere in that range. What makes sense to me is we're paying debt on some old bonds that will expire in 2021. And if the council desires to move that wastewater plant at some time, that would be the logical time to look at either moving the wastewater plant or, there's talks with maybe joining with the county or something. But at that point, that would be the time frame, because you could pay for whatever relocation or expenses to build something to connect to the county at that period of time, which also falls right in line on a time frame of what's going on with the power plant. And as part of my update that I did a couple months ago, there are some automations that we can do that help us from a security standpoint, from an operational standpoint, where we could see both plants working. But I wouldn't spend a lot of money on this facility. I would just do the minimum amount to monitor and not necessarily get into large amounts of control, if that is kind of the desire of the council.
Is $200,000 what you consider a minimum in terms of the automation then?
Oh, you could.
Well, I know, I'm just looking at for 1 year. I mean,
you through the 9 years. Yeah, I'm not saying it would be every year. I'm saying you could spend $150,000 in monitoring.
We are looking at page 60.
Yes.
And page 60 states that you are asking to budget $150,000 next year for this process automation. What you're saying is that you said a moment ago was that number was more like 9 years long.
No.
What is the number you need for next year?
If we, but I don't, that puts us a total of $350,000 for just monitoring, and we're not going to spend that much money. So
But this says,
prior years
I'm very
200.
confused.
See, if you look under prior years, we budgeted 200. This was the second year into automation of that plant, so we were going to spend $350,000 to do some automations. I can come back with a number and see where we would do for just monitoring, so that it's going to be less than that $350,000. I don't know exactly what number it will be, but that can be a number that I can.
Did you spend $200,000 on this year?
No. We spent money on security, and we're going to spend some money on networking that I think is a separate line item in the budget.
It's the next item.
And,
so how much
and
was
then
spent
we
on
haven't.
this line item, Cindy?
I don't think we've spent anything on it. I think it's a carry forward. Let me go back to that first sheet.
Well, the thing about it is every project's going to have to come to council anyway.
Right.
So this is a working number. Whether it's the right number or not is another question.
Yeah, but we don't we don't really need to spend it on a study or a plant.
Well, no, that's just stating optimization study where it came from. It's not a study.
Yes.
You follow what I'm saying? That's saying where it came out of. No. No, that's not. No,
I'm confused.
The plant automation will be parts and pieces and control devices and.
I think it says optimization study in parentheses to indicate that was a recommendation from the optimization
Yes.
study that the plant
There are
plant
things like
automation.
there's things like
It is the actual automation.
variable
Recommended.
speed motors and things of that sort that were in that optimization study. Yeah,
It is not the study. It is carrying out the recommendation of the study.
Exactly.
to use less power. Is an
What we would like to do, as one of the goals, would be more monitoring, especially when it comes to the electrical side. And some cities have found if they install monitoring devices on electric, especially in water and wastewater, and it's right on a screen, so an operator to see how many kilowatts they're using, then it becomes a game for them to see how they can operate that plant at the lowest kilowatt hours. And then there's competitions from one shift to the other, and at the end of the day, the city is saving money because they're operating at a lower kilowatt usage. So I would like to implement those things, but where we would go to a full-blown automation, if that plant's not going to be there in 9 or 10 years, there's no reason to do that. Let's just go with basic monitoring. There is some things that we would look at doing where we might put in some DO meters and that kind of stuff so that we have recordings of dissolved oxygen levels 24 hours a day. They're $4,000 or $5,000 for those devices, but not spend $350,000.
Okay,
Spend something
I'm sorry.
that's less than half of that amount is what our
very
goal is.
confusing because this
That's the right answer.
this says prior years you've already spent $200,000.
We budgeted $200,000.
Budgeted $200,000.
used on this?
Zero.
Actually, year to date, zero.
Thank you.
Zero.
We budgeted this year
I had
200,000.
the same question.
Yeah.
So
Okay, prior
We don't need to
years.
budget anymore.
Prior years, multiple. How much have we spent on this line item since the optimization study?
Zero.
Okay.
So I think
and we
I
don't
think
really need
And
to
we're
budget
budgeting 150 for
150,000
next
this
year is not necessary.
I think if I understand what Rob is saying, per the recommendation of the optimization study, he needs a full $350,000, and that's what he's placed in the budget.
Yeah.
What he's given that we're now having this conversation about the ultimate fate of the water sewer plant on the river, I think what he's suggesting is that if, as policy direction, you'd like for him to dial it back and spend the minimum that's really useful at this time, but not invest a lot of money until we make a decision about what's going to happen to the plant, then he'll bring you some revised numbers,
Exactly.
both
you.
for the
Got
12-13
it.
amendment and also for 13-14, if that's where you'd like to head, for
That's
him to
the
keep
right
it to a
answer.
minimum.
And that's where it looks
That's
like
the right
everybody's
answer.
at with this. So.
And Rob does not have a $350,000 piggy bank ready to
No.
spend on optimization.
Cindy, this is another rhetorical question, but if the timing is 8 or 9 years and we do something else in 8 or 9 years, how much money are we accumulating each year? I know you don't know precisely,
I
but
do.
$1.5 million or something?
He does know.
Right around now, as it's looked for the last couple of years in the audited financial statements, and as it looks with this $1 million blip off the radar in the coming years, it's $1.6 million a year or so. I'm just going to roll with that number. But what Rob also pointed out is that two big pieces of his debt service drop off. The Series 2008 drops off in 2016, late 2016. And the 2003A, or not the 2000, the other one drops off in like 2020-ish or something. So if we were to undertake a project of that size, I personally would suggest that you replace those bonds that are going away with new borrowing to do this. I mean,
Right.
I would not suggest that a project that has a 30, 40, 50-year useful life should be done with accumulated cash.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a business standpoint, I would borrow the money. But not only are you about $1.6 million to the good annually right now, but you'd almost have the timing such that the debt service that dropped off would just be replaced with another debt service stream, and so you'd still be to the good by.
But in the meantime, you would have accumulated $12 or $15 million of cash too,
possibly
over 8 years, 9 years, whatever.
all other things being equal, and possibly with some of the improvements that are still to come in the optimization, perhaps even more.
And with lower electric rates from FPL.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I
and what
agree.
we looked at too
Lower
was
electric rates are necessary. We agree to that.
And what we looked at too was, as you move forward that 1.6, we might look at paying down additional debt. So where we have some of those SRFs that are smaller little chunks, 300, 400, but they have an annual payment and you're paying interest on it, we can take 1 year's worth of savings, pay one or two of those off, and then you have an additional $20 or $30 or $40,000 in interest that you're saving the following year. So those are all items that Cindy and I have been talking about as we move forward, bringing back to council each time to talk about, to keep dropping that operational cost down.
And it is certainly a business decision. I think, the argument I've heard most often for, particularly in utilities, for a large project like that has a long useful life, is do you take, accumulate the cash that's coming from the customers that you have now to buy an improvement that will last for 30 years,
50.
50 years, generations of customers going forward. And so it's a generational debt kind of issue. It's a business decision. You could accumulate half and do half with debt.
Well, and for a timing standpoint, you would want to accumulate at least all of the engineering and all the other costs so that you could do those in the prior year prior to the debt dropping off, so that when the debt does drop off, you're ready to move forward with something. So you would definitely want to save that much money.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is we have options.
Absolutely.
Page 61, network system update for your SCADA.
This is what we put in for, we'll be able to control or actually monitor the plant from each location. So as we cross-train each one of these individuals, now we'll be able to see live what's going on at any given plant on any given computer within our system. So it'll help out drastically.
That's a good one. 62, well field meters.
Well field meters are a requirement of St. John's. We have to test them every 3 years, and if they're not within the required percentages, replace them. So, or repair them.
When you say percentage, you mean flow,
Their
rates?
deviation, they have to be at least 95% or better.
63, plant generator.
That's a future, what year is it? 2014, 15?
15.
I think we looked at scheduling that at the same time or 1 year past when we're looking at doing the RO plant expansion. The generator there is 1992. It's only sized to run, it won't even run the skid that's there. It only runs the operational part of the RO plant and the transfer pumps that transfers all the water to the tanks. So if you have a hurricane and outage, everything you rely on the line plant generator to run the line plant and all the high service pumps. So as we move forward to reverse osmosis, we'll size that to be able to operate at least 2 skids and bring in better quality water.
64, your membranes.
That's for next year. Like I said, this year we'll be coming in front of council for $75,000 to do the study to pick the membranes, and that's quite an extensive study. It's actually contacting a bunch of vendors, going through, making sure they can build the membranes that for the size vessels that we have, because we have older vessels at our plant, and then doing a benchtop study. So we'll be testing those membranes with our water to see actually what the results will be. Then we'll put a spec out based on cost and also operational costs from a power standpoint, and then evaluate it over a 5-year period. So there's quite a bit of work. We spent about that much the last time we did it, and I think we had another annual savings of about $80,000 or $90,000 a year back in 2000 or 2001 when we did it. We're expecting the same with going to a looser wound membrane of saving about $75,000 or $76,000 annually in electrical costs just for this one skid.
And who did that study for you?
Back then, Hazen and Sawyer did it. We're looking at Reese Environmental right now. They were chose to do the reverse osmosis work. They're out of Orlando, Winter Park.
65, odor control. I wasn't aware you had an odor control at the RO plant.
Yes, we have a biofilter bed just like we do at the wastewater plant. It's right there up next to the plant itself. Okay. We used to do chemical scrubbing, but we had a problem with that equipment, and it was also costing about $100,000 a year in chemicals. And they switched in 02, 03 to the biofilter bed. And we will expand. We tried, actually, there's Vapex units that we use for polishing at the wastewater plant. And when we installed those, we got rid of all the odors that you used to smell going over the bridge from the headworks years ago. Well, we tried using those. They built a real big one now, and we tried it as a pilot study at the water plant. But there's other components in the stream coming off the RO plant that it won't take out. So it's reacting quicker with those units, and so we're going to have to expand the biofilter bed when we do the expansion.
And on 66, your RO plant expansion.
Yes. We did a study,
what percentage of an expansion are you talking about?
That more than doubles the capacity.
Oh, wow.
So we have a 2 million, right now we have one 2 million gallon skid, and we have two more slots in that plant for, the original design was roughly 10 million gallons they wanted out of that plant. We'll never need that requirement. That was back in the 90s when you had high irrigation, no reuse, everything else. What we've looked at is if we take the plant to 4.5 million gallons a day, then right now our average daily flow has been as low as 4 when it's raining. You know, when we had that last October, when we had that huge storm came through, we had a week that we dropped down to 4 million gallons a day. Last week before the week before the rains, we were running at about 5.6, 5.7 million gallons a day. We dropped back down to 5 as soon as the rains hit. So the highest we've seen is just slightly over 6 to 6.5. So we're comfortable that our operating range is as low as 4 and as high as 6.5. So we want to get a line. Right now, the water that we're getting is 1/3 reverse osmosis, 2/3 lime softening. We want to switch that to where it's 2/3 reverse osmosis, 1/3 lime softening. We can then really dial in a good quality
So
water.
I take it you'll go to the new canister sizes?
The 8-inch sizes
8-inch,
and
the
standard,
6.
yeah.
What's the payback on this? Just curious. I mean,
I have a spreadsheet that I've developed that I've been working on that I'll get to everybody that shows the payback of everything on it. Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
67, another generator, a portable generator.
Those are two 175 kW generators that we have that are 1987s. Yeah. They're still running, so I moved that one out. We evaluate them every year, and if they look like they're doing great, we'll just continue to push that number out. But we keep it on the radar in case we need it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, those things probably have a note on the side of them that says return to Smithsonian, right? Number 68, lime softening plant.
That's the high service pump programmable logic controller, PLC. So that's the brains of how it runs in the sequence that they run and when they come on and come off and rotate each pump so that you're getting proper maintenance. And that was installed when they had the fires in '96 or something like that. So it's for an electronic device, it's lived its life, but it's going to need to be
On the
replaced.
brink. That's why you put it out
We have
there.
spares, we have everything, but the problem that you have with that stuff is finding somebody that can reprogram it. Just like you have in the space industry today, nobody wants to go back and program some of those old things. You got to pull somebody out of retirement to work on them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Network system upgrade on 96.
Again, that correlates back with the one at the wastewater plant. We'll be doing it at both plants.
70, chloride.
Chlorine titrator, it's a device that we monitor chlorine residuals.
'71.
That is
system?
the electrical system in the original lime plant building. And that's just the normal wiring in the walls. And that building was built in 1954. So,
No. Tell me it doesn't have Tell me it doesn't have aluminum wiring, please.
no, it doesn't have aluminum wire. But
Please don't tell me that. 72, breathing apparatus. This is a
that's what they call an air pack for
Safety
safety personal protection
equipment.
device.
on 73, the basin pump replacement.
That is a T4 pump that pumps water from a recovery basin to the lime drying fields, and it needs to be replaced. It's wore out.
Okay.
Gorman rump pump.
74 is a filter valve replacement. That's way out to 217.
Yeah, we've replaced the filters and valves in units 1 through 6 now, and we probably will skip over 7 and 8, and I think this was for 9 through 11, which are the newer ones. And there will be 32 years of age at that point and need to be replaced.
I'm glad to see that you're planning this far out. That's gives me a comfort feeling there that I don't have on a lot of these. 75, lime softening unit 3 and 4 refurbishment.
Yeah, we did those in 2002, so this will push them out at about the 15-year mark where they're a steel structure, so you have to go in and get rid of the rust and strip them and get the paint off them and fix the steel parts and then repaint them and put them back online.
Okay.
We actually have 3 units as part of the RO expansion. One of the units will tear down. We won't need it. we'll have units 3 and 4. We'll probably only operate one at any given time with one as a spare. So as we do the work, we would take one offline, run one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 76 wastewater treatment plant reuse meters. Is that a standing number that you put on, Rob? $7,500?
$7,500, yeah. Those meters run anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 for any given meter, so we usually just budget.
Okay. 77 reuse automation. Again, this is under the optimization study, right?
Yes. This we will do because it's part of the reuse system that will be there no matter what.
No matter what happens, yeah. Okay. 78 high service pump replacement. And you've got that out to 217.
Yes, that is. I think that's actually a jockey pump.
It's only 21 years old, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, we usually rebuild them.
That's doing really well.
Actually, this one we're looking at replacing with a smaller pump because right now they design the system for a normal pumping, but when we have wet weather, now we're not sending to exfiltration trenches or other areas, so all we really need to do is run water around the plant and for plant water and that kind of stuff. So you're running this 100 horsepower, 150 horsepower motor for a very small amount of usage. So we want to come in with something that's, even though it's on a VFD and it's running way down, resize and put one more pump in that slot to be able to handle real low flows.
79 air compressor replacement. Out to 2018.
They run the sand filters, and we replaced them back in 2002 or so. And we talked. They were running fine, but talking with the manufacturer, they were like, "You may want to budget for them in X amount of years." So that's we're just sticking it out. As we get closer to that, we may keep moving those out if need be.
80 and 81 are computer replacements for your information system. PC replacements.
Yeah, I would have
those
to
are
look.
just at their life cycle.
Correct.
82
desktops, same thing.
What is the life cycle for a desktop these days? I thought it was 5.
At least 5.
Yeah, actually, what we had done a couple of years back was rather than have a hard and fast date on replacement of PCs anymore, IT works with the individual departments and just assesses the condition of the particular PC. When it becomes up to the point where it doesn't serve the needs, or you have to fix it all the time, which is cost prohibitive, then we replace them. But we don't just automatically say, "Well, it's 3,
Right.
it's gone."
Thank you. That's where I
IT
was
actually
going.
has a report they do every year that has red, green, and yellow lights on every PC in every division in terms of, hey, this is one that's really getting old. Let's look at it. So.
And when we run into it, a lot of times is software.
Right.
We'll build new software out there where the old one can't support it, and we end up having to replace it because the software packs are
Understood.
newer.
One of the things we hadn't done in the past that we do now, too, is we'll take in the older ones, and if they're useful for, say, like Parks and Recreation to do brochures with, but not good enough for GIS or Rob's needs, we'll move them around the system, too, rather than disposing of them.
Good answer. Page 82, lift station pump replacement.
We budget around $30,000 a year.
Yeah, standard annual.
Standard, and actually we're probably replacing more pumps now than we've done in the past because just like every company out there, they're creating stuff that's functionally obsolete anymore. Where we used to be able to get 25 years out of a lift station pump, now at year 10 they're not making the parts or whatever for them. So where we still have pumps that are 20 years old that we've been rebuilding all this time, now you can't get the parts from them. So now we're replacing some of those 20 or 25 year pumps. I know they can't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Software especially. 83 is the electric panels for them.
Yeah, we're getting about 25 to 30 years out, and we have 128 lift stations out there, so we try to budget for a couple each year. And
That's a pretty good life cycle for.
well, everything we've been putting in is all stainless, and you have to on the beach. Otherwise, you're not going to get 10 years. You're going to get 5 years on them on the
if
beach
you're
side.
lucky.
So once you spend the original money to move forward with stainless, they last a long time.
85, 84, gravity sewer rehabilitation, rehab.
Yeah, we again, this is 100,000 we're budgeting, and then as you get out to 17, 18, there's no reason other than there's funds available because we haven't identified anything else that I just said that we could have additional funds available to do some more work.
Okay. 85 is your TV truck.
That's for next year. We need to replace some of the components on them.
What is it?
It's a little tiny camera that's on a cable that has a crawler on it, and it crawls down the sewer system and has a pan and a zoom, and we can inspect cracks and all kinds of stuff. Actually, we found 3 diamond rings for people over the years.
Oh my gosh!
Where they've called and they flushed it down the toilet, and we've gone in with the
That's
TV and then being able to recover it for them and give it back
How
to
do you
them.
recover it? Let's say you.
We'll flush water down until we can collect it in a manhole and then take it out. And
But just for your information, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to look for cracks
The
and
benefit.
identify. That's just an extra
Sideline.
a little sideline.
The,
Somebody
the other side is the truck always gets a complaint because of traffic out in the middle of the road, too, so we get those.
Do you charge for that service?
no.
do you
just a
accept
benefit we offer.
benefit?
Sideline.
That's
86 utility line locator. What is that? A magnetometer or something?
It's actually, it sends a frequency out. We hook to a wire. When we install water lines or sewer lines, we'll run a regular gauge wire along with it, and we connect to it, and it sends a radio frequency, and then it picks it up, and we'll be able to locate over the top of the line, and they just wear out.
And if
Use
we
it on the beach
Not,
for,
not
for
anymore.
sweeping
No,
for,
not those. They're outdated.
if we had a complete set of GIS maps, would that be necessary?
Yes, because even when you have the maps which help us with everything, you're required by law to be within 2 feet of that line when you locate it.
Oh.
If not, if a contractor hits it, then any downtime or anything else, they can charge you back, and by law, you got to
You
pay
own it.
them. So, yeah.
87 is your vacuum truck.
Yeah, like Monty, that's one of the pieces of equipment Monty and I always talk about sharing someday in the future. Right now, we each have one, and until either one of them goes, we just keep pushing that out. So they're an expensive piece of equipment. This one's used to clean out lift stations, to clean grease and sewer lines, that kind of stuff, where you have usually in the multifamily areas and in the commercial areas where you have restaurants, you'll get a grease buildup from coming out of the establishments. And actually, multifamily more than anything, with everybody's food grinders and pouring stuff on the 3rd floor because they don't want to walk it down to anything. You end up with a lot of grease in the
Zip everything easy goes down the drain. Yeah.
So they're used to clean that. Right now, if mine's down, I use Monty's. If Monty's is down, he uses mine. So I don't know how good it would be if we eventually got down to one, but he uses it for all of his storm sewers and pulling all the sand and everything else out of pipes and stuff like that. But so far it's working fine. We got about 15 years out of the last one, and I think we replaced that in 02 or 03, so you're at 10 years now into it.
88 is your water distribution meter replacement, and that's just a running number also annually.
I had budgeted 60 or 65,000 in years past. We bumped that up to 100,000 if we go to the AMR type system.
Okay. 89, line and service replacement. That's a standing number also, right?
Correct. We originally replaced a lot of galvanized lines. We've come to the end of a lot of those, but you do have some cast iron lines that are out there that, luckily, the original town area was put in 1920s, and the service life on those lines were about 130 years. And then anything after World War II, the service life is about 75 years. So some of those are within 20 or 30 years of the end of their service life. And what we're finding is the areas around the airport are actually failing faster than the areas of the old town. So we still have I don't want to dig it up, but there's still a line underneath the railroad tracks from 1923. So I don't know. Wow. Maybe we'll have a 100-year party or something. So.
What is the material transite?
That is asbestos cement pipe. So years ago, anybody uses the term asbestos, they think cancer, but in this case, it's encapsulated in cement. So the only time that it becomes cancerous is if you take a saw and you cut it and it gets as a dust particle in the air and you breathe it in. But from an ingestion or anything, it's encapsulated in cement. So, but part of that is we would like to replace those old pipes also. The problem with those
is that material used extensively throughout the city with the older?
Not in this city. In a lot of other areas like Palm Bay, Port Malabar, those areas where general development utilities, they used to buy lots of it, and there's miles and miles and miles of it. But there's not a lot of it in Vero. The problem with it is it's a great pipe; it'll last forever. But if you do construction near it, it can crack and bust open in a heartbeat.
Fragile.
So it's very fragile. So that's one of the reasons you want to get it out of your system at some point in the future. So we'll look at those areas also and replace it. We've replaced a lot of it over the years.
Page 90, you have another line detector. You have two of them?
Yeah, one in wastewater collection and one in...
Okay.
We have two locators that go out.
And that closes you out.
Finishes me up. Just as a recap, I know one of the things... this morning I did a quick number, just so you know... If you looked at the utilities separately from an operating standpoint, including debt service, water costs us about $7.6 million in expenses, including all-inclusive. The revenues we're looking at is about $8.8 million. Sewer, combined with reuse, is about 6.35. The revenues coming in is about 7.3. If you looked at sewer separate, it's about $6 million. Revenue, $6.7 million. Reuse, 0.35, revenue, 0.6. Now, those numbers are going to change because we're changing how the budget is, but just in general, we're running both of them about revenues over expenditures is about 15%. So we're receiving in about 115% of what our expenditures are, which is a good, healthy margin. And that's good for rainy days, everything else. I wouldn't...
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tomorrow we'll take up the airport fund, the electric fund, and the risk management fund. Is there anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you.